Thank you for the opportunity to share. You want to come up here and stand for just a minute? In case you haven't met us before, it's been 2 years since we've been here. Don and Sandy Graham, living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We've been serving in Singapore for 8 years. We're home for good. We got home about 3 months ago, so we're getting resettled into our home in Lancaster, and we were really looking forward to visiting you, say hello, and sort of thank you, and sort of farewell all together here, because our time with OMF will be finished at the end of June. We'll be sharing in morning worship, and that sharing will be a bit different, because those of you that have come this morning, I didn't want you to sit through the same thing twice. So we'll have a bit of personal sharing here during this time, and then during morning worship we'll have a different presentation, and we'll show you more photos of Singapore and talk more about that. So what I'd like to do is share some of our experiences, share the things that troubled us, share the things where God blessed us, and then if you have questions about our work, about Singapore, you'll have an opportunity to ask about that. So this morning I'm going to show you a video. This was made a few years ago. I'm the facilities manager at the International Center in Singapore, OMF's main headquarters, and Sandy managed the 30-room guest home, which is like a small hotel. So this video talks about sort of what we do in a day's time and how we support all the workers in that region that come to Singapore for training, for medical, for other reasons. So hopefully this video will play. Now you want to make that full screen, and then the light switch is over there. Go ahead.
One of the first things you'll see when you come onto the campus of OMF is the Have Faith in God Pavilion. This pavilion is photographed by many visitors with the Have Faith in God sign in the background. The 3 front columns facing the street are part of the original British mansion that sat on the property in 1954 when the OMF missionaries bought the property with their own personal savings for a sum of 83,000 Sing dollars. And that was a good deal because the owner was looking to make a quick sale. Over the years, that property has increased in value greatly and is now worth many millions. We are blessed and privileged that God provided such a beautiful property in such a pristine area of Singapore across the street from the Botanic Gardens. In addition to the OMF-sponsored training events, seminars, conferences, and orientation courses, we rent our meeting rooms to local churches. This gives OMF an opportunity to share the resources and the rooms that God has blessed us with, and also provides a place for these churches to conduct their meetings. Also, it provides an opportunity for these churches to be on our campus and to learn a little bit more about the ministry, the work, and the mission of OMF. Our cleaning services are provided by a company called Team Pursuits. This is a faith-based business. The owner has decided he would like to employ men from a halfway house, ex-offenders, and train them vocationally and mentor them spiritually to help them to become productive members of society. We are really encouraged and blessed to be able to partner with Team Pursuits, offer these guys a job. Sometimes that comes with headaches, but to give them a second chance. It also gives them an opportunity to be on our campus where we can share the love of Christ with them. When I think about my job as facilities manager, I think about it in terms of being a steward of what God has given to OMF. I think about the long history of this property and how it was provided out of the very life savings of missionaries. So we are very intentional about operating efficiently, reducing costs, taking care of the equipment and property, keeping things well maintained so that we are being good stewards of what God has provided here at Clooney Road.
One of the more challenging parts of my role is managing the dining room. We have 3 local staff people that cook and do the cleaning there. I make up the menus and do the food purchasing, ordering, and scheduling. We like to be able to serve nice meals, both Asian and Western, things that really our guests enjoy, but we have to be very conscious of cost as well, and so we sometimes look for alternative ingredients, but it's very important that our guests have affordable, but yet good-looking meals and tasty meals. Our guest home has about 30 rooms. Each one is a little bit different. Some have 1 bed, some have 6 beds, and there's all varieties in between. My job is to make sure the right person is in the right room at the right time. Sometimes when we have groups coming and going, it's really a challenge to fit in the puzzle at the beginning and the end of each group's arrival and departure. But I find that really rewarding to be able to get people where they're going to be happy and comfortable, and to be able to not have to say no to people when they ask me for a place to stay. One of my most important roles is hospitality, making people feel welcome when they come here. It's really important for me to have their name on their door as they arrive so that they know that I'm expecting them. And then even just trying to match up the right room for the right person. Some people have their favorite rooms that they like. And I just like to have the rooms looking clean, looking sharp, and so that it looks like care was taken to place the right towels that go with the curtains, that go with the bedspread. And having paintings or artwork on the wall with scripture verses, I think, is really important, because it helps people to remember that God is in control and He's watching over them while they're here. Meet Fiona, our housekeeper. Fiona takes care of all the details. When guests leave a room, she cleans it up and gets ready for the next guest, making up the beds, cleaning the bathrooms, emptying the rubbish. I have to say that Fiona is very reliable. I never have to go in and recheck anything she's done.
The International Center houses many of our global departments, such as training and development, finance, IT, our intranet personnel database, mobilization, and media, and our general director's office. In addition to that, the Singapore National Office also shares space in this building, so nearly every day we have at least 50 people coming to work on our campus.
Many of our guests come here seeking a safe harbor, seeking a place where they can be still and know that God is God. And so they come here from difficult situations. They're maybe ill and they're looking for medical care that they can't receive where they are. They are looking just for a place to be safe because they're just burdened, they're burnt out, and maybe in the country where they are, they're persecuted for being Christian, or maybe they have to worship in secret behind closed doors. And here they can be really who they are. They can rest and relax and not have any worries. We hope you've enjoyed spending your day with Don and I going through a day in our life here in Singapore.
We really appreciate your partnership, your prayers, and your financial support, because without those, we wouldn't be here. We're glad that you're part of what God is doing in Southeast Asia.
If that's a serial VGA, we could always hook it to the big one too.
Sorry?
If that's a regular serial port, we could always hook it to ours. It's got a second port. If that doesn't work later.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful that the projector didn't melt down before we got through that. So we'll just move on. So that's a good representation about what we did. We're in support roles. The International Center, all new OMF workers come there. 4 times a year, we have a month-long class, so all the new workers come. They sort of get acclimated to the hot and sweaty weather of Southeast Asia. They get acclimated to the food, and they begin their orientation process with OMF. And that all happens on our campus, and we take care of those folks. I make sure that the air conditioning works, which is important in Singapore, the plumbing, the electric, all the daily, day-to-day operations. I have local staff. I have a local Singaporean maintenance technician who interacted with the local contractors. A lot of the work he could do himself. I tried not to touch any tools. I'm sort of a hands-on guy, but one of the things I learned early on is let the locals, let your staff do their work. It builds respect, it builds trust, and it just makes for a good working relationship. Do you want to add anything about the work that you did? What impressed me about Sandy's role, she was often available to talk with guests. Sometimes they just wanted a listening ear. I was up running around literally often, fixing or solving or working on something. However, Sandy was a little bit more accessible with her office being there on the corner. A lot of people would walk by. And if you want to talk anything about
Well, it was just a way to help care for people who were coming there from sometimes very difficult situations. And they're out maybe in a neighboring country, Thailand, Indonesia, wherever it might be, and they're there with a small team of people. And sometimes when you're with those same people day in and day out, life gets challenging because you don't always get along maybe, or you don't agree with the people that you're with, and you feel like you need a break from them, and you just need someplace to unload. And so sometimes it just became a safe place to unload, because you can't always unload with your team members because you have to continue to work with them. And so it was just a really good place for people to be able to share, maybe over a cup of tea or coffee or something, and just for them to get away from their day-to-day work. So, yeah.
I'd like to talk about some of the things that God brought to us that I feel allowed us to flourish, to feel at home, and to do well. We had a very strong involvement in our local Singaporean church. We were encouraged before we left the U.S. to get involved with the local church. Find one, get involved. The church in Singapore is very solid. Most churches are biblically based. They do not have the denominational splits that we have here because the liberal agenda has not made inroads to the church in Singapore yet. That agenda is pressing very hard on the doors of Singapore. But at this point, the church is relatively united, the denominations are strong, they're Bible-based, and they're evangelical. So we were part of an Anglican church, Anglican as in the UK, not Anglican as in the US, which is Episcopalian, Lutheran, and liberal. The Anglican church in Singapore was very Bible-based, very strong. So we found a church close by. It was by far mostly Singaporean, which is what we wanted, because we wanted to be immersed in the culture. You can live in the OMF bubble, but we want to be more in contact, rub shoulders with the locals. And that proved to be really beneficial for us. So we were involved in a local church. We were involved in a cell group. We helped with the parenting course. And I was asking myself, what does an American couple know about parenting Asian Singaporean children? It's very different. Many of their children are raised by a house helper or an in-law because of the close family ties. Often both couples are working professionals. Sometimes they're posted into a different country for a period of time. Parenting's very different. And we also were able to participate in the marriage course for ourselves. Sandy, you want to talk about the ladies' night activities you did for OMF people?
Yeah, so Don mentioned the orientation course. One of the things that I like to do toward the end of the orientation course, when all the new workers were there and they had gotten to know one another, is have a night in my home and invite the ladies in, and we would just do hand massages and facials and foot baths and just kind of fun things that ladies like to do. Put on polish on our nails and things like that, and of course we had some snacks and it was just a fun time. But beyond that, it gave the ladies a chance to interact with one another, to kind of just ask personal questions. And another thing that I shared with those ladies, because a day or two after this ladies' night often is when they were leaving Singapore and going out into the fields that God called them to, which may have been China, Thailand, Cambodia, Japan, wherever. They were going out into these places. Many of them had not yet learned the language, and so how do they communicate with these people? And one of the things that I felt that as ladies they could do is just to share something like this in their home. Ladies always like to pamper themselves no matter where they are, and they like to eat snacks and have tea or whatever. And so it was just kind of a way that we could encourage them to be able to minister to ladies as they went out onto the field. And so we had a lot of fun times at those nights. And you know, just to add, that's something that you could even do here with your neighbors. Maybe you don't know the ladies really well, but you'd like to get to know them. Just invite them over. Do something really informal, and it might lead to other ways that you could eventually, you know, talk to them about the Lord. And so it's just a way, an informal way to get to know ladies.
I'll talk more about this in the morning worship service, but I also had the privilege of getting connected to a ministry with the foreign workers. There's 750,000 foreign workers, migrant workers that come to Singapore to get jobs, to do all the physical work. So they build the roads, they build the subways, they build the airports, they build the shipping yards, they work in the container industry. And I was able to go to their dormitory, help them learn computer skills and a little bit of English. And that was really rewarding. That was totally separate from anything I did at OMF, but it connected me to the local Singaporean culture. And I found that really rewarding, fulfilling, and taught me to look out for people who are marginalized, because the foreign workers were like the very low class of people. Another thing I think that contributed to our flourishing was we were intentional about our recreation and times of rest. So we rode our bikes. We tried to get off campus once a week and ride our bikes around Singapore, and there was plenty of great places to ride bike. When you work where you live, it's very challenging, and you never get a real break from your work. Often, for many weeks, many months, we're on call 24/7, and that can wear you down. And you need to take that time away, however you can get it. And we were thankful for the provision of being able to ride bikes in Singapore, at least for a couple hours, and separate ourselves from work. Another thing that was beneficial to me spiritually was preparing devotions. We do like a morning chapel at OMF from Monday to Friday for 30 minutes, and Sandy and I would take turns in a rotation where we would prepare a prayer request and like a morning devotional. And at first I was very inhibited because I'm speaking to PhDs and people that have been in the mission world for a very long time. And at first I said, well, what can I possibly offer to them? I'm not even trained at a Bible college. I don't know Greek or Hebrew or any of this. But God said to me, Don, you need to share what I am doing in your life from your heart, because that will touch where they are as well. And so that's what I went with. And it was rewarding for me because I had to dig into what God was showing me in my daily reading. I often would speak from that or speak from challenges that I was faced with. And I was also part of a Singaporean's men's Bible study. And this was a group of men my age and a bit older. Many were retired, and they were all like retired professionals. So there was doctors, attorneys, there was a court justice, a whole variety of Singaporean professionals. And they invited me into the group. I think I was the only expat there, and I was part of that group for 5 years. I learned a lot of spiritual insights, but I also learned a lot about Singapore culture, Singapore politics, Malaysia politics, and Indonesian politics, the closest surrounding countries. That was, again, rewarding and fulfilling. It made me feel part, and it gave me an understanding of what was going on in Singapore while we were there. Those are some of the things that we think God brought to us that made our time there really positive, and it was a positive 8 years. I think leaving was difficult, saying our goodbyes. There was a couple things going on with the organization at the time we were leaving. It was changing. It was transitioning itself. Sandy and I were transitioning away from Singapore, saying our goodbyes, and some of that just created some anxiety and confusion. But about maybe a month before we left, God brought me a couple things. That this time of transition increased our faith in God's provision and care, because there was things we didn't understand, things we weren't sure about, things we couldn't really figure out. And I think He brought us to an end of ourselves and helped me realize that apart from Christ, I couldn't really respond in a way that glorifies God. He also increased my understanding that God is sovereign of all, whether I understand it, whether I like it, or not. And He broadened my worldview to understand that my little pond, which was OMF Singapore, is not the whole scene where God is working. And so these transitions that were occurring were affecting the larger view. So God helped us work through those difficult aspects of transitioning. There was things that we personally were dealing with as we transitioned and said our goodbyes, and also the organization was transitioning. And those two things sort of collided, but God helped me see through that, sort through that, and relying on Him. So that concludes our time of sharing this morning. Any questions?
You just want to share a little bit about the people that are going to be fulfilling portions of your role? I know.
Yeah, and that is part of a bit of a tension, a transition. We were training a couple who had been in Singapore for 7 years, and it's a bit of a long story. They were in Singapore, Americans. They were in Singapore for other reasons. The Bible college degree was finishing up, and they were looking to volunteer and be missionaries with OMF. So we were working with them, but now, here we are, end of May, they have to return to the U.S. to finish their OMF application process. And they will be here for a couple months to raise support, finish their application process. Then they need to get a work permit to return to Singapore and begin what we have trained them to do. But in the interim, the place may be on autopilot.
Well, there's a couple there, but
There's gaps.
they've had limited time to interface with this couple that we trained, and then they're going to be covering a time when it's actually very busy there at the site. There is one of these orientation courses that we mentioned going on during the month of July. There's some people coming in during June, quite a number of meetings, and so there's a lot going on that they're going to have to manage. And like we kind of mentioned before, a lot of the people that were there before are no longer there. There aren't any long-time people remaining who ask questions of, so it'll be a challenging time for them.
It's an opportunity for us to turn all of that over to God. He was doing fine before we showed up in Singapore 8 years ago, and he'll do fine now. But it tugs at your heart because you want everything to continue running smoothly. But from where we are right now, we don't have any control of that. God does. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time this morning, and then for our morning worship, you'll see some more slides of Singapore, and we'll talk about a different aspect of our ministry there. So thanks for your attendance this morning.
Thank you.
Okay.